If we want to kick off, would someone have a question they'd like to ask myself, Scott, or Clare? Yeah.
Thank you. My question would be, what are your techniques or methods for restoring calm and rational thinking to yourself after you find yourself in a state of anxiety or fear creeping into your mind?
I think one of the first things to do before we respond to something, because we often think that it's events that dictate how we feel or how we might respond or behave, but actually it's about how we think about the event that's important. So I think the first question to ask yourself is, who do I want to be here? What kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be somebody who's going to respond irrationally, or do I want to take a bit of time and think about how I want to respond and do so in a more calm way? So knowing like how you want to be and who you want to be, I think is the very first thing. And the second thing is just really looking at, and this takes practice, but looking at your thoughts about what's happening. So tuning into that voice in your head that is going all of the time, that is commenting on what's happening or telling you how to respond, and really challenging the irrationality of maybe what it's telling you to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to tell people is that you 100% own your thoughts and emotions. And we don't hear that because we say, no, Clare made me angry. And Clare can't actually make you. Clare might do something or say something that triggers my internal anger. But I have to possess that anger and I have to demonstrate it, I have to express it. That's my choice. And what I find sometimes is we don't like to know that we have it. We don't know that's our choice. That's just the way it is. That's life. The traffic's annoying me. Everyone's annoying me.
Guys, get set. Next one.
No, that's just being
Is that making you annoyed?
3, 2,
Hold on. Sorry.
1, go.
So,
Go.
I'm glad you can hear that, because sometimes I hear voices.
Stick it out, guys. Nearly there. Last 3. Last 2. 2. Second minute.
You've no idea how relieved I was when you started laughing, because I thought that was your man again in my head. That's fixed now. So, just to summarise, the hardest thing is to tell people that we control our own thoughts and emotions, and that is difficult because so many things in our external world can be catalysts that set off anxiety, frustration. But we have to take responsibility for that, and we have to say, okay, it's my choice now. How do I respond? And in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he really explores that idea, the power of choice, the power of acceptance, the power of, as Clare says, who do I want to be in this situation? And we don't have to become that environment. We don't have to become, if we're in with a negative, angry person, we can be in that environment but not become that environment.
It's just something that's occurring to me there as well, as your question was specifically about anxiety. And when we have an anxious thought, it triggers adrenaline in our brain, and adrenaline has a really profound impact on our body. So it speeds up our heart rate. It makes our breathing more shallow, and those responses then can make us feel, that physical sensation of anxiety. So as well as maybe looking at or trying to examine and rationalise your thinking, it's also really important to help your body to slow down, to reduce that amount of adrenaline or to work it out, to slow your breathing, to deepen your breathing, and that also helps reduce the feeling of anxiety, which then makes the reoccurrence of anxious thoughts less likely. That's important too.
Okay. Another question? Well, this could be a very short session. Yeah, I'll come to you first, and then I'll be over to you in a second.
So my question is, why is anxiety so prevalent in today's society? And is it because of the way we live through technology, Facebook, Instagram, and computer world?
Do we all hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay, so Claire or Scott, why is anxiety so prevalent in today's society?
From my perspective anyway, I think it's twofold. The first thing is we're more aware of it, so we're talking about it more, we identify it more. And the second thing is, I think, I don't have experience of living 50 years ago or a century ago, but I think that life at the moment is busier. There's a lot more demands on our time than there has been in the past, and things are a bit more complex, and both of those things generate anxiety. So I think it's life is hectic, but then there's also the fact that we talk about it more, we name it more, and we as a society are more aware of it.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing I think of is where Gerry was talking before with your sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight mechanism, and that's kind of designed for if a bear walks in the tent, and if you're living your life where there's bears walking in the tent every 10 minutes, you're going to be overdriving that sympathetic nervous system, which is going to increase your anxiety levels.
Yeah, and I also think it's trust. So I talked this morning about emotion, and you know, if you think of a baby that can't feed itself, that can't do anything for itself, and yet it's so calm and so relaxed because it has a huge level of trust. It trusts that it's loved. It trusts that the universe is a fair place. It has no preconceived negativity of threat or danger or that anyone's going to hurt it. So as we developed as a society, the more we have lost a sense of spirituality or religion, the more we rely on science, is the less there actually is to rely on. And we're bombarded with messages every day from Sky News and, you know, health failures and HSE. We're constantly being bombarded with the amount of stuff you can't trust. We're being bombarded with messages of fear because fear sells. Have you woken up with a headache? You might have a brain tumour. Buy this tablets. Did you wake up this morning? Have you ever felt sad? You might have depression. If you just listen to the messages we're being bombarded, this is a fast-paced, unstable world. If anyone has ever sat at the top of a small mountain and watched around, it's not actually. There's not much humanity in the world anymore. Spend a day in hospice and you'll see what happens there. So we just need to be mindful of the messages that we are bombarding ourselves with and the messages that we are being bombarded with from other people about this fast-paced, unstable world. It's not. But everybody has a communication agenda. And for me, it's about finding perspective. Go to the places where you'll best find calmness, humanity. Yesterday I had a great conversation with a guy, and we talked about the phone, and the phone is all pervasive now and the stress it involves, and I said, why don't you turn your phone off? Why don't you? But the less we trust in a God or the less we trust in the universe is the more ego comes into place. I need to know, I need to control, I need to have a reason, and I need a purpose. You don't actually. Maybe you just need to be and accept what is for what it is. Because there is no other than what is. And the first step to happiness is to accept what is as it is. And don't fight it and don't resist it. But in the absence of a sense of perspective, in the absence of a sense of trust, there is only a terrified ego, terrified that maybe I'm not enough, maybe I'm not seen, maybe I'm not heard, and the biggest trauma of all, maybe I'm not loved. So we need likes and Instagram hits and connections. We need affirmations from other people to give us the affirmations that we can't give ourselves. We need to hear the kind words from other people that we can't give to ourselves. We need to invest in technology that tells us we're good enough. Sign up to sites and plans that make us feel successful. But what if we didn't need external stuff? What if you didn't need external affirmation? What if you didn't need external validation of your being and the beauty of your being? What if you didn't need external validation that as you are right now is exactly as you were meant to be? And what if all you needed to do was have a little more trust, and whether that's in God or in this universe or in something. But what we do know, there's something at play in this universe that can guide, can direct, if we allow it to be, and not interfere with it too much. So it's a long-winded answer, but it's a little bit of all of those things. Trust more, accept more, surrender more. Surrender the need to be in control, the need to know, the need to be seen, the need to be heard. And replace it with just a hunger and a longing to be exactly as you are. And there's a question over here.
A question, but so there's a misconception that mental health refers to ill mental health. So what's advice around maintaining positive mental health?
I think for me, mental health is very similar to physical health in that we need to take care of it. We kind of take it for granted in a way that we don't our physical health, where I suppose we've a lot more bombarded with messages about our physical health, that we need to exercise and keep our hearts healthy and cut down on sugar and drink more water and do all of these things that we know contribute to our long-term physical well-being. But we also need to do things that contribute to our long-term mental well-being, and we have to take care of that and take responsibility for our mental health in the same way that we do physical health. So for me, the biggest thing that contributes to my mental health and maintaining that is the practice of getting in touch with how I think and keeping track of that. So that and that is a practice, it's something that takes ages to really do. You can start off by just getting a little notebook, and when you have 5 minutes at lunchtime or before you sit down in front of the TV in the evening, whatever you do, just spend a couple of minutes of getting in touch with whatever it is that's going on in your head. And if you do that, if you make that commitment to yourself today and practice that every day for the next couple of months, you will find that at random moments throughout the day, you're more able to do that. You're more able to tune into what's actually happening. So then when you're in a stressful situation, or when you're in a situation where your mood is maybe a little bit lower or things are hard, you're more able to do that more readily. And I think for me, that is probably the biggest thing that I do to mind my mental health, is to really keep an eye on how I'm thinking. And kind of give that back to myself. So I think whatever it is that works for you, if you can find one technique, Google it, talk to people, find one thing that you can do for your mental health, in the same way that all of you are investing, I know, in your physical health, whether it's by coming to WellFest or doing exercise or whatever it is. Just find one thing and just do that for a couple of months and start there.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just an investment you make in mental health. If you listen to the words mental health, it's health. And a few years ago, me and Brezza started My 1,000 Hours. You know, when you walk down the street and you see someone that's physically fit and strong, you probably would assume that's somebody that goes to a gym regularly. So when you see someone that's confident and funny and really seems to have a just nice flow in his life, we'd be surprised to think that they go to see a psychologist, because in the dark stone ages, you only went to see a psychologist when things had gone horribly wrong. But thankfully we've developed to, I have people who have absolutely nothing wrong with them, and they come to me all the time. Because mental health is, as Clare said, you have to be proactive. Because life will erode confidence, calmness, composure. Life isn't always simple. But if I can do little things on a daily basis to replace that, and I call it a CODE, calendar of daily events. It's little things I do every day to restore and replenish confidence, calmness, composure, because life can take, trauma can take. So I need to have some little things in place. But I'm really, the fact that at a WellFest they now have a mind tent, the fact that we're looking around at all these people and we realise now that your mind overcomes matter. Mind becomes matter. What's in your mind will eventually become the physical. So we've realised that to invest in little things, in calmness, composure, regularly stopping and assessing, what's in my mind now? What's my mind focused on? What's that asking me to do? And as Clare said, there's loads of simple little things online. There's loads of little very simple things we do around positive affirmations, visualization, yoga, meditation, that really allow the mind and spirit to unwind and let go of the stuff that you need to go off. Ross, I know you have a question over there.
Hi, how are you? I have a question regarding the current, I suppose, trend of positive thinking and being very positive all the time. And I've also seen quite a few things on Facebook where people are saying that that's maybe having more of a negative impact on people who are looking at all of this need to be positive all the time. If I'm not positive, if I don't look like those role models on social media and I'm not always in good form, there's something wrong with me. And that actually can make people regress further with their mental health. So what is your opinion on that? And what advice would you give to someone who is really trying to grow within themselves and become more content within themselves, but maybe is looking outward and judging themselves for not feeling positive all the time? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said. You know, sometimes we live in the shadow of a preconceived notion of what I should be, and that can be exaggerated by social media. But that can only have an effect on you if in yourself you feel that you need to be somebody else. So I can look at 50 lads every day who are bigger, stronger, faster, better looking than me, and I can choose to feel that that makes me not enough, or I can choose to say, God, look at that guy, isn't he really good looking? It's just an observation. But an observation on his good looks doesn't have to be a condemnation of my looks. I am who I am. And I talked earlier about the jigsaw. The only way a jigsaw works is because every piece is different. If one piece became insecure and says, geez, I don't look like him, I need to look exactly like him, the jigsaw doesn't work. We live in a tapestry of life, an art piece, and the only way it works is because we're all different. Whoever created this incredible universe, the stars, the moon, the seas, the plants, whoever created that, created you. And he created you exactly the way you are, for a reason. What's the story that you were meant to write? And there's a simple little quotation I came across a while ago, and it says, the pen that writes the story of your own life should be held in your own hand. So you can blame Facebook or Twitter, but that's just stuff. What do I think of myself in response to that stuff? If we get into comparison, we're always going to be left, because there's always people faster, stronger, better looking, and we feel insecure. But then there's also people less well off, less secure, so we feel. So Paul O'Connell used to tie it up well. He'd say, lads, don't get carried away with anything. We're never as good as they say we are when we're winning, and we're never as bad as they say we are when we're losing. We just are who we are, and we'll do what we do. And it's a beautiful thing. I am who I am, and I'll be who I am. So it starts with that decision. Somebody else's success, somebody else's good fortune. Do I allow myself to observe it and be grateful for them without condemning myself, without comparing, without judging? And this idea that everybody is perfect. If I said to you here, I'm always perfect, I always have positive thoughts, I never feel down, I'm always super fit, hands up who'd believe me. So you either want to be human or you want to be fraud, and anybody that tries to pretend that everything is perfect all the time, I think we know what we're dealing with there.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Gerry, and I think it's really interesting because I think 20 or 30 years ago in Irish society, if you'd asked somebody to say something positive about themselves or their lives, they would have gone, no, you can't be doing that. What are you talking about? Whereas we talk a lot more about the importance of positivity. We talk a lot more about how to engender that within our lives, and I do think that the person who asked that question, that you're bang on, because it's almost like the opposite thing has happened, where now we don't want negativity in our lives, or at least that's the perception. And that can create a huge pressure on people to not be vulnerable or to not be negative, to not respond realistically. Life is hard. It's really hard, and there's ups and downs, big ups and downs all the time, but every day there's little ups and downs as well. And I think I work a lot with people around cognitive behavioural therapy and how to change thoughts. So if you're having negative thoughts or whatever, how to change those and how to challenge those. And I think one of the things that I've realised is that you change what you can, and when you can't change something because it is genuinely really hard and a really sad time or a really negative or difficult time, accepting that and just being kind to yourself, comforting yourself as you would a kid, is all you can do. And being honest about how hard it is. I think that is so important. So it's that balancing bit between trying to be positive in the aspects of our life where we can, and then also acknowledging that that's not always possible, as Gerry said. None of us are able to be that or do that all the time, and accepting that.
I suppose the only bit I'd add is that if you look at social media stuff, it's only ever a snapshot of that person's life, and it's usually got some sort of filter on it. So it's not reality to start with. So that's the big thing, is if you're comparing yourself to something that's probably not a reality to begin with. The only bit of advice I'd get.
Yeah. Donald.
I'd like to comment on the positive question. I would say that being real trumps being positive any day. And that being real involves or includes being vulnerable. It includes being courageous enough and vulnerable enough to act or not act appropriate to the moment, and not to the deep conditioning and programming that we've all been through. I also feel that our anxieties and our insecurities and our lack of confidence is largely based on the fact that we are looking in the wrong direction almost all the time, and our culture, our upbringing encourages us to look in the wrong direction. The wrong direction is externally, is all I mean. When one looks inside, and when it becomes part of one's life, there and there only is security. Looking for external validation from outside is a dead end to nowhere, completely and utterly. If one needs it, one feels a void, and the void is imaginary. The void is because the imagined internal void is as a result of looking outside for the validation. And I've come to realize in recent years that it's less and less that we heal ourselves. It's more and more that we allow ourselves to be healed. By that I mean acceptance and embracing the so-called negative, embracing everything that is, including the dark side. I'm primarily referring to a type of trust, giving in, giving up, surrender.
I know Donald a little bit, and he mentors me a little bit, and every now and again I think I know something. I meet him for tea, and in 10 seconds I realise I don't know anything. But for me around, what's the purpose of being? What's the purpose of my life? And then you meet Donald and he says there is none, it's just be. So maybe you might just expand on the power when we surrender the need for purpose and to be.
When we have our strongest sense of separation, in other words, when ego is at its strongest, it's a very false kind of pretender place. A pretender is insecure by the very fact of being a pretender. And, it's in losing ourselves that we find ourselves. It even says in scripture it's in dying that we're born to eternal life. And I don't think that necessarily means a physical death. I mean, I get a sense that it's dying to aspects of ourselves that we previously believed in and are now either disappearing or at least reducing in their strength, that we're no longer identified. Identification is part of the human experience. And as long as we're identified with something, we're not really ourselves. There's a guy from Scotland called Sandy Newbegin. He gives talks on meditation. You know of him? And he gives a lovely example of lying in a meadow on a fine summer's day and looking up at the blue sky. And then some birds fly across his vision. And let me say that the blue sky represents awareness, consciousness, being, all that is. And the birds cross the line of vision, and his mind, or our mind, is distracted by the birds. The important point here is that this analogy is not about the birds, it's about the loss of the sky.
I love it. For me, I've heard that story before, and it's about sometimes we allow our attention, our focus to go into things that don't really matter, and then by becoming focused on that, we lose sight of what actually matters, of being non-judgment, non-comparison. We get caught up in little boxes or little labels. One more thing.
In a sense, whatever we think we are, or whatever we perceive ourselves to be, we cannot possibly be that. What we truly are, in a sense, is beyond words, it's beyond description, it's beyond imagination. So whatever you think you are, you're not that.
Now for you. Figure that out. But for me, the important things with that is, sometimes I look for validation. Am I a good brother, a good husband? Am I a good psychologist? Do people enjoy my talks? That's all me putting myself in a box, and each box needs to be propped up and validated by somebody else. What if I just started by saying, am I being real and being me? And after that, people can make their own decisions as to what they define or describe me as. But sometimes we see the box that we need to fit in, and then we work very hard to fit into that box. Any other question? Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody in a time that the message is it's okay not to be okay, who has worked very hard on their mental health through talk therapy or cognitive behavioural therapy or medication, who still doesn't really have the strength to be able to go that it's my thoughts that are making me feel like this, that it's still exhausting, it's still tiring, that sadness is still there after years of working through it. What would your advice be there?
Do you want to go first, Clare?
Sure. First of all, I think that's a really brave question, and I think you're probably asking a question that lots of people have. I meet lots of people who feel very similarly to that, and I think the biggest piece of advice is to keep trying, to keep doing, to keep going when it's not easy, because it's not, and life isn't. And there are days, I'm sure, when things feel a bit easier, and then days when they feel harder again. And all any of us can do in the face of things that are hard is to keep trying and to keep giving ourselves a pat on the back when we succeed at doing something, even if it's only for a moment or a minute or an hour or a day. And you just keep going, you keep on trying. But it's hard, and it's a practice, and I think you mentioned strength there, and strength is so key in helping us to overcome, like if you think about when you get a physical issue and how you need to overcome that, and sometimes the solution is to building up strength in surrounding areas to help you do that. it's the same when it comes to mental health. You really have to build up strength, and there's days when that strength is simply not there, and then there's days where the muscles are working better and things seem to be a little bit stronger, and you just have to keep building up that strength, and it's hard. Thanks for asking.
And I think for me, very similar. It's in my own life, you know, again, I lived in an illusion of the person that I should be, and when I wasn't that person, when I was in the dark, I resented the dark, I resented the thoughts that I had in the dark. And I suddenly realised that the source of my own problems wasn't really the depression, it was my response to it, my hatred of it. So instead of fighting it and resisting it and saying, I should be something else, this is what I am. And what I learned maybe was that what that gave me was a sense of compassion and a sense of humanity that actually people liked. And for years I hid it. And for years I didn't want anyone to know. And for years I resented it. And then when I began to express it and talk about it and share it, I realized that that was the thing that made me real, made me human. Why would I want to be anything else? And it's not that it's easy at times, and there's days I know it's not easy, but at least when I'm in there, if I can remove the guilt and remove the anger and remove the resentment, it becomes a little bit easier, because now I'm just dealing with the dark. I'm not dealing with my anger towards the dark. I'm not dealing with my guilt of being in the dark. It's just the dark, and it doesn't last. It only lasts if I'm fearful of it and resentful of it. Then even when the lights are on, my mind is still dark, or my mind is anticipating the dark, and I live in the shadow of the darkness. And what I've learned is the less I resent it, and the less I judge it, and the less I judge myself for being in it, is the more when the light is on I can appreciate it. Or that when I'm in the dark, it's just the dark. It's only the dark I'm dealing with. It's not my own inner voice. Are there other questions? Yeah.
Gerry.
Yeah.
Gerry here.
That's it.
You've spoken a lot about kind of being content with yourself and not comparing yourself to others. And I suppose my question is, how do you replicate that mindset in the workplace when you know your performance is directly being compared to that of your peers?
I don't know if you want to. Well, I go first. I think it's really difficult because there are situations in life where we are being assessed on our performance, whether it's an interview or it's a stressful working environment. And I think the only thing that you can do, because sometimes that's out of our control, there are other people out there who will judge or are in a position where they have to, whether it's related to performance or not. And all we can do is to coach ourselves through that and be kind to ourselves through it, regardless of what the outcome is. And knowing, I suppose, really believing in our own kind of goodness and our own abilities, even when sometimes the rest of the world doesn't. I think that's really important, is just really reaffirming in your own head and being compassionate and kind to yourself, especially in those situations where our performance is being evaluated.
If there's any other, I hope we have loads of time. I have to go in about 3 minutes because I'm doing a talk up here. But if there's talk, Scott and Clare are happy to stay. But if there's any other question for me, I'd love to take it. Yeah.
How are you keeping? I'm a primary school teacher, and I'm sure a lot of people here either have children of their own or work with children themselves, and I'm noticing that a lot of children are kind of suffering with worries or anxiety or even depression or other mental issues as well. And my question is, have you got any advice or tips for anyone that has children or working with children to help them realise that everything is going to be okay?
I think for me there's a couple of really practical resources that I find really useful for, did you say your primary or post-primary? Primary. There's a book by a woman called Dawn Huebner, Huebner, and it's called What to Do When I Worry Too Much, and it takes kids through the really simple cognitive behavioural therapy strategies for how to identify and manage worry. And it's a book that I use all the time with primary school age children that I work with. And you could generalise it out and use it within a classroom setting. I advise parents to use it. I think it's a really fantastic resource. But I think that one of the biggest things, I work as a psychologist from an attachment focus, where I believe that the relationship and the strength of the relationship that a child has with just one good adult, whether it's a teacher or a parent or a caregiver, that's really important. And what's important in that relationship is a thing called containment. And containment is about being like a vessel for a child to pour their emotion into, and being able to hold on to that and not let it slop around, and help the kid to feel safe anyway. So really validating their worry when they express it. Lots of us try and help a kid feel better by saying, oh, there's no need to worry about that, don't worry about that. Whereas actually all that does is make the child feel isolated and like they're on their own with trying to handle that worry. Whereas if the first thing you do when a kid comes to you with a worry, or an adult, is to validate it and say, yeah, you know what, that's a really scary thing to be dealing with. If I was worried about that, I might feel the same way. Validating it, and then helping them to know that even though they're worried, they're still going to be okay. Life is still going to go on. They're still going to wake up the next day, everything is going to be fine. I think it's really important, I suppose, like a lot of people would ask, when is a problem? And I think specifically for kids, but adults too, if worry is impacting on your life and creating like a function, important to seek professional help. But I think if you just use those simple strategies and those really easily available books and online resources, it might help. I don't know if Gerry's gone. Is he gone? Does anybody else have any questions? Any further questions?
One over here. Just generally, I'd like to get the panel's view on social media and its effects, and particularly for young kids and teenagers, if you're advising parents on how to manage it with their kids.
That's such a common question, and I think the reality of social media, like there's a lot of debate around, you know, the age of consent for social media and how young should children be exposed to it. The reality is it's here, and it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and the only way that parents and I suppose adults can manage it is to have, from a very early age, really honest conversations with kids about the impact that it can have, and about using social media responsibly, and starting those conversations as early as possible, and then just keeping up to speed with their own information about different social media websites, the different things that are available. But I think the biggest thing that you can generate with a kid, with a young person, is like an open relationship where they feel safe enough to come and talk to an adult if there's an issue, because the reality is that there's just dangers everywhere in different parts of society. It's a part of life, and we can't protect kids from it all the time. Social media usage is having an impact on young people's brains, it's having an impact on their emotional well-being, but all we can do is just equip them with the knowledge that if they're finding things hard, they can come and speak to an adult in their lives. I think that's the biggest thing you can do for them. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? That's a good point. So myself and Gerry will be back again at 3:45. We're going to be talking a little bit more about thinking, about how to tackle thinking and cognitive behavioural therapy. So we might see a few of you then. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.